We continue our lectures in a theoretical course of English grammar. Lecture 7 is devoted to the discussion of such grammatical categories of the verb as person and number and tense and aspect. The categories of person and number are closely connected with each other. There is a concord between the subject of a sentence and its finite verb predicate. That is, the subject dominates the predicate, determining the person and number of the predication, while the predicate dominates the subject, ascribing to it some action, state, or quality. If we take a sentence and place the piano every day, we can see that this subject, which is given in the third person singular, determines the person and number of the predicate, which is marked by the inflection S. This concord is particularly clear with the present tense of the verb be, which is the only conjugated verb in modern English grammar, while with the rest of the full verbs, this outward concord is restricted to a contrast between a third person singular present and other persons or plural number. Therefore, grammarians consider grammatical categories of person and number as syntactically determined categories. Now we'll discuss grammatical category of tense. When we speak about the expression of time by the verb, it is necessary to distinguish between the general notion of time and its lexical denotation on the one hand, and the grammatical time proper, which is called tense, on the other hand. Time, like space, is considered to be a universal form of existing things and phenomena that are continually changing. We can think of time as a line on which is located as a continuously moving point the present moment, the linguistic content of which is the moment of speaking or writing. Anything ahead of the present moment is in the future. Anything behind it is in the past. The term tense, from Latin tempus, denotes a grammatical time which is one of the typical meanings of the finite verb. The expression and non-expression of grammatical time, together with the expression or non-expression of grammatical mood, constitutes the basis of the verbal category of finitude, that is the basis for the division of all the forms of the verb into finite and non-finite. Tenses, a grammatical category that is realized with the help of verb inflection. Since modern English has no inflected form for the verb for expressing future time, the threefold semantic opposition of time is reduced to two tenses, the present tense and the past tense. The main principle of the morphological classification of verbs is the way how they form their past simple and past participle, that's participle too. Accordingly, verbs are divided into regular and irregular verbs. Regular verbs form the past simple and past participle by adding the inflectional morpheme ed, while irregular verbs form them individually. For instance, regular verbs are ask, asked, asked, dance, danced, danced, play, played, played, etc. Or irregular verbs, for instance, be, was, were, been, or build, built, built, bring, brought, brought, cut, 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 give, gave, given, etc. Now we will point out and discuss some functional semantic peculiarities, first of the present time, present simple, and then of the past simple tense. We'll begin with the simple present tense when it expresses the present time. There are three kinds of typical uses of the present simple tense in modern English. The first is the state present, which is used with stative verbs to refer to a single unbroken state of affairs that has existed in the past, exists now, and is likely to continue to exist in the future. It includes the so-called timeless present, which refers to eternal truths such as 2 and 2 make 4, or to less extreme instances of timeliness. For instance, the British Isles have a temperate climate. It also includes more restricted time. For instance, Margaret is tall, or we live near Chicago, or this soup tastes delicious. The second type is the habitual present, which is used with dynamic verbs to refer to events that repeatedly occur without limitation on their extension in the past or future. Like the state present, it includes the timeless present, such as the earth moves around the sun, or the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and more restricted time spans, like we go to Brussels every day, or she makes her own dresses, or Bill drinks heavily. If the state present refers to something that happens at the time of speaking, this is not often so for the habitual present. We can say Bill drinks heavily when he is not actually drinking. It is a sign of the habitual present that one can easily add a frequency adverbial such as often, usually, always, sometimes, every year, etc. to specify the frequency of the event. For instance, he usually does his homework in the evening, or sometimes we go to see him in his cottage. The third type of the present tense is the instantaneous present, which is used with dynamic verbs to refer to a single event with little or no duration that occurs at the time of speaking or writing. It is used only in such restricted situations as sports commentaries like Black passes the ball to Fernandez, or self-commentaries like I enclose a form of application, and the last with so-called performative verbs that refer to certain specific acts which are performed by uttering the sentences like the following: I apologize for my behavior, or we thank you for your help, or I bet you 6 pence it will rain tomorrow, or I declare the session open. Now, we'll discuss the cases when the simple present tense expresses past and future time. There are 4 additional kinds of uses of the simple present. The first is the historic present, which refers to past time and is characteristic of popular and fictional narrative style. It conveys the dramatic immediacy of an event happening at the time of narration. For instance, just as we arrived, up comes Ben and slaps me on the back as if we were lifelong friends. Or, the crowd forms around the gateway and excitement grows as suddenly their hero makes his entrance. The simple present is optionally used to refer to the past with verbs of communication to suggest that the information is still valid. Such use of the simple present can be observed in the following sentences. Jack tells me that the position is still vacant, or I hear that you need an assistant, or the Bible prohibits committing adultery. The simple present tense typically occurs in main clauses with time position adverbials to suggest that a future event is certain to take place according to the schedule. For instance, the plane leaves for Paris at 8 o'clock tonight. And finally, the present simple tense refers to future time in conditional and time adverbial clauses. For instance, He will come if you invite him, or I'll let you know as soon as I hear from him. Now we'll discuss the cases when the simple past tense expresses past time. There are three kinds of a simple past to express the past tense: the event or historic past, the habitual past, and the state past. The event or historic past is used with dynamic verbs to refer to a single definite event in the past. The event may take place over an extended period, as in the sentence "the Normans invaded England in the 11th century," or at the appointed time, as in the sentence "the plane left at 9 a.m." The habitual past is used with dynamic verbs to refer to the past events that repeatedly occur. For instance, when we were children, we spent our holidays in Spain. The state past is used with stative verbs to refer to a single unbroken state of affairs in the past, as in this sentence, "I once liked reading novels." The habitual and state meanings of the past can be paraphrased by "used to." For instance, when we were children, we used to spend our holidays in Spain. Now we'll discuss special uses of simple past tense. There are three special uses of the simple past: in reported or indirect speech, the attitudinal past, and the hypothetical past. In reported speech or indirect thought, the simple past is in reporting verb may cause the verb in the past subordinate clause to be backshifted into the simple past. For instance, "She said that she knew you," or "I thought you were in Paris." The attitudinal past is used to refer more tentatively and therefore more politely to a present state of mind. For instance, "Did you want to see me now?" And finally, the hypothetical past is used in conditional and complementive or object subordinate clauses to convey what is contrary to the belief or expectation of the speaker. For instance, if you knew him, you would not say that we have conditional clause here, or "I wish I had a memory like yours." In this case, we have object clause. The implication of the conditional clause above, "if I knew him," is that you do not know him, or of the object subordinate clause, "I wish I had a memory like yours," implies that I do not have such a memory. Now we'll discuss some means of expressing future time. In the absence of an inflectional future tense, that's, verbs cannot be inflected for future tense in the same way as they are inflected for present and past tenses. There are several ways to express future time in modern English. The most common way to express future is by means of modal auxiliaries will, shall plus the bare infinitive. For instance, "He will be here in half an hour," or "Will you need any help?" It should be noted that semi-modal shall is not often used in the statements with a first-person subject singular or plural to indicate future time, while questions with a first-person subject always require this auxiliary. For instance, "Shall we go to the cinema?" or "Shall I help you with your homework?" Second, the semi-modal "to be going to" plus the bare infinitive in the present tense is used to refer to a projected future action which is chiefly associated with personal subjects and agentive verbs. For instance, "When are you going to get married?" or "Martha is going to lend us her camera," or "I'm going to complain if things don't improve. When this construction is used in the past tense, was going to, it refers to a projected future action seen from a point in the past. For instance, it was summer and Matthew was going to start school. Third, present progressive is usually used to refer to the projected event that will occur in the nearest future. For instance, the orchestra is playing a Mozart symphony after this, or I'm taking the children to the zoo next week. Fourth, the simple present tense is used to refer to a future event which is certain to take place according to the schedule. For instance, the plane leaves for Paris at 8 o'clock tomorrow, or the match starts at 2:30 tomorrow. Finally, the simple present tense is used to refer to a future event in conditional and time adverbial clauses. For instance, he will do it if you pay him. We have conditional clause here, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear from her. Time clause we have. Now we are going to discuss grammatical category of aspect. Aspect is a grammatical category that adds time meanings to those meanings of the verb expressed by tense. The category of aspect answers the question: is the event or state described by the verb completed, or is it continuing? There are two aspects in English, perfect and progressive, sometimes known as continuous. The perfect aspect most often describes events or states taking place during a preceding period of time, and it is formed analytically with the help of the auxiliary have plus past participle of the main verb. The progressive or continuous aspect describes an event or state in progress, and it is also formed analytically with the auxiliary be plus present participle of the main verb. Verbs that do not have aspect marked on them are said to have simple aspect. Both perfect and progressive aspects can be combined with either present or past tense. There are the following forms of aspect in modern English. Present perfect, for instance, has examined. Past perfect, had examined. Present progressive, is examining. Past progressive, was examining. Present perfect progressive, has been examining. Past perfect progressive, had been examining. Verb phrases can be also marked for both aspects at the same time, which accordingly is known as perfect progressive aspect. The perfect progressive is a hybrid form when the perfect and progressive aspects are combined in the same verb phrase to refer to a temporary situation leading up to the present or to some point in the past. For instance, it has been raining since morning, which is given in the present perfect continuous form, and the fire had been raging over a week when the fire engines arrived. The past perfect continuous form is used here. The present perfect often refers to past actions or states that begin in the past and extend to the present and will perhaps continue in the future. For instance, they have been unhappy for a long time, or they have lived in Amsterdam for 5 years, or she had owned the house since her father died. Unlike the simple past, the present perfect does not normally co-occur with time adverbials that indicate a specific point or period in the past. I saw her a week ago is given in the past simple, while they have been unhappy for a long time is given in the present perfect tense form. Some adverbials and prepositional phrases such as just, recently, lately, for ages, for a long time, till now, up to now, and so far, as well as phrases and clauses introduced by scenes, co-occur with the present perfect and not or very seldom with the simple past. For instance, the train has just arrived on platform 4, or I have not seen him since Monday, or I have not seen him since we left school. The use of the present perfect for recent events implies that the result of the event still applies. For instance, he has broken his arm, and the meaning that his arm is broken now. Or I have emptied the basket, and the meaning that the basket is empty now. There are cases when the choice of this or that form of the verb depends on the target situation. Compare, for example, the sentences with different target situations. The first, she has given an interview only once in her life. And the second, she gave an interview only once in her life. The use of the present perfect and the first sentence, she has given an interview only once in her life, implies that she may yet give another interview, whereas the second sentence gets quite a different interpretation because of the simple past of the main verb, which indicates that the situation is not valid for the present moment. For she gave an interview only once in her life implies that she can give no more information since she is dead. The past perfect refers to a time earlier than another past time. For instance, by 5 o'clock he had done most of his work. Past perfect verbs tend to occur both in subordinate and main clauses. In this case, the event denoted by the verb in the past perfect was completed by the time of the event described in the simple past tense. For instance, they had moved into the house before the baby was born, where the moving into the house precedes the birth of the baby. Or, let's contrast the sentences with two different situations. She had owned the house since her parents died, and she has owned the house since her parents died. The first sentence implies that she does not own the house now, whereas the second entails that she still owns it. The present progressive describes events that are currently in progress. For instance, what are you doing? Or, I'm looking for my bag, etc. Or events that are going to take place in the future and about which the speaker feels quite certain. For instance, Bob is coming back tomorrow, or I'm going with him next week. Past progressive verbs describe events that were in progress for a limited period of time. For instance, she was writing short stories then, or I was reading an economics books last night. The progressive aspect implies temporariness, whereas the non-progressive implies permanence. For instance, she writes short stories entails that she is a short story writer, or he teaches in a comprehensive school entails that he is a teacher in a comprehensive school. Progressive aspect is most common in conversational fiction. In conversation, most progressive verb phrases are in the present tense, while past progressive verbs are preferred in fiction. Some verbs are most often used in the progressive aspect. In fact, some verbs like bleed and start almost occur as progressive verbs. The common progressive verbs come from many semantic domains, including aspect verbs, including both dynamic and stative verbs. Dynamic verbs as chase, jump, dance, etc. or stative verbs like look forward, expect, etc. Other verbs, for example, instantaneous verbs like arrest, begin, stop, shrug, etc. never occur in progressive aspect. Two characteristics determine whether a verb is commonly or rarely used in the progressive form. The first is whether the subject is an agent, that is, the doer of an action, or an experiencer, that's a person who undergoes the sensory or cognitive experience expressed by a verb. And the second parameter is the duration of the action described by the verb. The agent actively controls the action or state expressed by the verb. In contrast, many verbs that rarely occur in the progressive have a human experiencer as the subject of the clause who does not control a situation or state but experiences its effect. This first characteristic helps to explain why some verbs that describe states and perceptions occur as progressive while others do not. For example, the perception verbs like look, watch, stare, and listen can be freely used in progressive aspect, and their subject is usually a human agent. For instance, he is staring at me now, or I felt he was not listening. In contrast, verbs like see, hear, appreciate, desire, want, know, like, etc. rarely occur in the progressive because they describe perceptions which are not experienced and a state of mind which are not controlled by the subject. The subject may refer to a human, but the human this time is an experiencer rather than an agent. We can illustrate this statement by the following sentences. I saw him the other day. Or, well, I really appreciate your coming so early. Or, he did not know what to do. The second major characteristic that influences whether the progressive is used with a verb concerns the question, how long does the state or action described by the verb last? Those that extend over a substantial period of time are usually described by the verbs and the progressive aspect, while actions that happen very quickly or temporary states of short duration are rarely represented and the progressive. For example, stative verbs like stay, wait, sit, stand, live can refer to situations that extend over time, so they frequently occur in the progressive. For instance, Sandy is staying with her for a few days, or we were waiting for the train, or I was standing there the other night, or when I first came to the city, I was living in a hostel. So, that's all I wanted to say about the grammatical categories of person and number and tense and time, tense and aspect. Thank you for attention.